Hello friends, today I'm going to be reviewing this book, The Thoth Tarot by Scott D. Miller. Now, there are quite a number of well-known books on the market on the Thoth Tarot, but to me this one is relatively new. It was published in 2017, and yeah, I just haven't seen a whole lot of reviews about this one, so I thought I'd do one and just sort of like go through what this book contains and just give you some of my overall thoughts and opinions. So this is a soft cover book. The exterior has this like really nice smooth matte finish, and it almost feels like a rose petal. I will point out that it might be a little bit easy to get fingerprints on this cover, so I would suggest, keeping your hands clean when you do pick up this book, but I mean, it's always a good habit anyways, right? So yeah, the contents of this book are printed entirely in black and white. But yeah, let's go to the table of contents and I'll show you a little bit of what's here. So first it starts off with an introduction and a foreword. And then there are these other, what I call the introductory chapters, so to speak. So you've got a bit about a card overview, which basically just breaks down the structure of the 78 tarot cards. And then you've got a section on astrology, the Kabbalah, and using the tarot. Now, as you can see from the page numbers themselves, these sections are relatively short, and that's why I call them the introductory chapters. And the main bulk of this book is really on the individual 78 cards themselves. And then finally, you've got a nice little bibliography at the end, and the book comes to just over 280 pages. Yeah, and then if we just go to the foreword here, I think what's worth pointing out here is that the author describes this book as a compilation of detailed notes from when he was learning the Thoth Tarot. So to me, I think that this sort of like sets the expectation for the reader. And by reader, in this case, I mean like the person reading this book, not necessarily the one, reading the tarot cards per se, but of course they could very well be the same person. So I think that, maybe it's trying to set, this idea or notion that, this isn't meant to be some kind of like groundbreaking new discovery or reinterpretation of the Thoth Tarot, but more like it's just a collection of information about it, as you'll see very soon in the later parts of this book, especially when it comes to the individual cards themselves. Alright, so next, this is the card overview section or chapter. Like I mentioned before, this is the part where it just sort of like breaks down the structure of a typical 78 card tarot deck. So it's not necessarily for the Thoth Tarot, but I think it applies to any 78 card tarot deck. And I like how the information is presented in this, really organized way. For example, here in the Major Arcana, it describes those 3 phases for the cards, say 1 through 7, 8 through 15, and 16 through 22. So, I don't think everyone talks about this, and I like that the author did show this breakdown of the majors. And then you've got a bit about the court cards, some numerology, some stuff about the suits. So everything's just very nice and concise. And I think this is something that I would have really appreciated back then when I was first learning the tarot, because to me, I think it's still a really good reference for me right now. Like, for example, I know that the Thoth Tarot can be a little bit pippish at times, especially like, with the minor arcanas. And I think having, these numerological correspondences can really help someone with getting something out of those cards. And the next part is about astrology, and really basically just another list of correspondences for each of the 12 zodiac signs and the 10 planets. And of course, in this case, when we're talking about planets in astrology, we're using that term quite loosely here because we're including the sun and the moon, right? And perhaps you might think that, having all these correspondences to start out with in this book might seem kind of dry. And I don't blame you if you feel that way. But what I think the author is trying to do here is to make sure everyone's on the same page, that anyone reading this book can approach the tarot cards with that same fundamental or foundational knowledge. After all, it's hard not to talk about, astrology and Kabbalah when we're dealing with the Thoth Tarot. So, they're just such an integral part of the cards, right? So anyways, I think, having this chapter is still a nice refresher and reference for people like myself that, even if they're not completely new to this kind of information, it's just really handy to have something like this on hand. And I thought that the categorization of the zodiac signs into positive and receptive were something new to me. So I thought that was really interesting. Alright, so next we've got this nice little diagram of the Tree of Life with all the sephiroths and the corresponding keys or major arcana cards on the different paths. And then you've also got the planetary glyphs as well, all summarized in this one diagram. And I'm sure many of us who have touched upon the Thoth Tarot have come across this at some point before, so I won't really go into it, but basically, the remaining pages just go into a little bit more detail about the sephiroths. I don't think I'll also be going too much into this using the tarot chapter because it's quite generic. Again, not really specific for the Thoth Tarot, but it's just, some ideas or, ways you can read the tarot, how to ask a question, for example, here. So I don't think I'll really get into that. So here's where the real chunk of this book really starts. So with the major arcana, obviously, and there are a couple of parts to each of the cards. And I guess I'll just say up front that, I feel like each of these cards are kind of like, or the way the information is presented, I should say, it's kind of like a sample platter of ideas from different authors, including Scott Miller himself, of course. But you'll see what I mean in a bit. So first you get this snapshot of what the card is about. So he calls them the tarotnyms. And then you get some keywords and phrases. So that's all good. And then there's this table. Maybe let's see if I can like zoom in a little bit here. Okay, so and then you've got this table called the Bauta. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. This hiding place quadrant, and it's a system developed by a different Scott Grossberg, as you can see. And from what I gather, this framework aims to add depth to a tarot card reading. It's used to help lift away some of the things that are hidden under the mask, of either a person or a situation, I suppose. And, it's really trying to help get to the heart of what it is that might need to be revealed in a tarot reading. Now, I definitely found this to be interesting because I haven't encountered this anywhere else before. And yeah, so you can see, for example, there are a couple different quadrants. There's the mask, the beast, the light, and the shadow. So it seems like it's trying to get to different underlying layers. And I think the descriptions below here, for example, under the mask, it says what makes me who I am, how I view myself, what I'm attracted to, and what I take for granted in myself. These kind of like, I guess, describe what this mask is. At least that's what it seems like to me. And then here under the title of the mask, innocence, idealism, those are the qualities that are perhaps, describing these things, right? Again, this is just all what I think it is. And this table shows up in every single major arcana card. So, for example, here, the priestess, again, you've got the same table. And you'll notice that the information, like this part, the mask, again, here it says what makes me who I am, how I view myself. These four descriptions are exactly the same for each major arcana card. It's really just these qualities under the title that are different. So when I was reading this, I guess I felt like it felt a little bit repetitive to have these, all be the same in each major arcana card, because it's really just those four key qualities that are different, right? And as you can hear from, how I'm describing this quadrant, I guess I don't really get a very clear sense of how to really use it. And I think what I would have preferred personally is if, before all these major arcana cards, if the author could have perhaps provided a little bit of background information on this Bauta hiding place quadrant, how to use it, and that sort of stuff. I think it would help us as the reader of this book to really get more out of it, I think. And perhaps even, for all these descriptions that are repetitive in each card, maybe it could be placed in that introductory section so that it doesn't have to take up as much space and repeat itself in each of the following 22 major arcana cards. But having said that, I still think that there's still value in, having this here because, like I said, it's something new to me. I haven't encountered it before, and I do think that it provides, a starting point to, explore a new system or framework for reading the cards, right? So, anyways, let me zoom back out a little bit here. Okay, all right, so yeah, after the hiding place quadrant, you've got the card meanings, and there are some from Miller himself, and he also goes to quote some other authors here. So, for example, down here you've got something from someone by the name of Tarantino, and what I will say about the meanings is that I do think some of them are different from what you typically see. I felt like, some of them made me go like, okay, I hadn't thought of it that way before. I think one of the cards that made me think that way was the Empress. So, in the Empress meaning section, it starts off with saying, the Empress is the Great Mother, the eager protector with zealous encouragement. Those who nurture and protect are often viewed, even by those receiving of her comfort, as strangling and suffocating. And then it goes on near the end to say, push her too far, and her defensive instincts make her suddenly and quickly withdrawn, unaffectionate, and appear to be unloving. So it feels like, to me, it starts off with like the normal sort of like meaning of the card, and then it talks kind of like about the reversed meaning of it. But I guess the intensity at which I feel like it describes the card, like if, for example, on the right hand side here is the positive meaning of a card, and typically if you talk about the reversed meaning of a card, the intensity level might be like over here. Scott Miller, I feel like, takes it even further. Like he describes the reversed meaning like in an even like more extreme way. And I think for some people, I don't know, some of them might feel a little bit a bit too much maybe. Another one I think was like the Sun card. So in the Sun card, again, it starts off with the positive meaning, happy with the current situation, achievement of the desired goal is near, and then pushed too far and unable to force happiness, the person takes on a pathetic and pitiful air, the very attributes he or she dislikes in others. So again, it kind of like went on this other tangent for the reversed meaning, I feel like. And I will admit that some of them did, I feel like were a bit challenging to read. But, I suppose it might not be a bad thing. Like if you read things that are always like what you expect, right? It kind of like really confines your ideas maybe. And so even though some of them felt a bit challenging to me or I couldn't really connect with, I feel like this keeps my perspectives open. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the meanings of the major arcana cards. But then you've got, after the meanings section of each card, you've got a nice list of correspondences here and the symbolism. And I do really like these sections because it's so straightforward and it's exactly what I want to see when trying to understand the symbolism or quickly find the correspondence of something. I think the symbolism section gives a good basis for understanding what's on the card, and it doesn't go too deep into it, which isn't to say it's a bad thing. I think that this is a good level of information for those who are starting to learn the cards. But if you do want to dig deeper into the symbolism, I would suggest the Banzhaf book instead. But I did find that some of the information on the same, symbolism in this book versus the Banzhaf book are a little bit different. So even if you do have that other book, I think that you might still find some new nuggets of information in here. And then next we've got the interpretation part, and I found this part to be mostly interesting and enjoyable. It's taking the card meaning and just further distilling it down with the author's insights and thoughts. Finally, we have the divination part, and for those of you who have the Gerd Ziegler book, Tarot Mirror of the Soul, this section may be repetitive for you because for some of the cards, basically this section has a word-for-word excerpt from that book. And for some of the other cards, it follows it similarly, but there are some adjustments here and there. But if you don't have that book, this section I think gives you a taste of what that book is great for, especially the questions to ponder and also the affirmation. So yeah, that's why I said this book kind of feels like a sample platter to me. There are nice little things from different authors that you can savor here and there. All right, so let's move on to the minor arcana. So it's divided by the suits, and for each of the suits there is a short section that gives you a bit more information about what the suit is all about. Its significance and relation to Kabbalah as well. I liked this part, or each of these parts, because, for example, in the Wands section, it's not just like, okay, Wands corresponds to fire, which means passion kind of thing. Like, I do feel like I got something out of it, even though it is just a short little section here. So moving on to the individual cards themselves, as you can see, there's less information on the minor arcana cards as compared to the majors. I'm not super disappointed by this at all. I guess it's just more like if there was more, it would be bonus points in my mind. But anyways, you still get the taronyms and the elemental snapshot, just like what the essence of this card is about, right? And then for the main part of this card, you get the meanings, symbolism, and divination sections. And you can see that the symbolism is quite short here, and I do think that it's understandable because these cards are kind of more pippish, and so there really isn't as much to draw on in terms of the symbolism. But for example, if you go to the court cards, if I can quickly flip to that. Yeah, so for example, here in the court cards, you can see that the symbolism is quite expansive. So yeah, you can see the difference there. But I guess what I will say is that, compared to the major arcana, what you don't get in the minor arcana descriptions are the Bauta hiding place quadrants. And I'm not really sure if that quadrant is really something that's just meant for the major arcana only. I have no idea. And there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of information on the system on online, so yeah, I couldn't really check that out too much. And then there's also no correspondences section either in the minor arcana cards, although I will say that, they are kind of slipped into the symbolism section whenever possible. For example, here you do get the zodiac and element correspondence in the court cards. For the other non-court cards, yeah, so for the non-court cards, you still get that zodiac and planetary correspondence, which is also under the symbolism section. But, just as for the overall information presented on each of the minor cards, I do think that it gives you a good basic understanding of the cards, even though it's not like there's any kind of new groundbreaking perspective going on here, at least, in my opinion. But it is what it is, and I still think that, it doesn't detract from the fact that this book provides a good, solid amount of information on each of these cards. So yeah, I think that, just some overall final thoughts and conclusions on this book. I do think that it is a very all-rounded book, and it is a good self-contained guide on the Thoth Tarot. I felt like it was very well organized. There's a good collection of information here, and it's just very well structured. Like, it's very easy to look something up if you want to. I also think that this book is good whether you are a beginner or not, because of the fact that there's so much reference material and correspondences to make use of. I feel like the author has an interesting view on some of the card meanings, especially some of the major ones. It can be a little bit different, but like I said, I feel like it's something that I haven't encountered with some other books, and it just gives you something different to think about. And the amount of information presented on the symbolism is a really great place to start with if you're learning this system. For more in-depth symbolism, information, though, like I said, I would go to the Banzhaf book. And there are so many other great books out there as well. I also feel like this book was great value for what you pay. It's definitely way more affordable than some of the other ones out there. And it's just a nice way to sample some of the other Thoth Tarot related authors. But, I guess having said that, the flip side to that would be if you do already have those other books written by said authors, then, you might not get as much out of this one. I mean, it's hard to quantify, but I would say that a good chunk of this book are extracts from those other books. I don't know, I'm just guessing here, but perhaps maybe 20% of it would be that way. So anyways, I would still recommend the book, though, if you feel like getting it, just because I do feel like it's a nice supplement. There are little bits of information here and there that do differ from what you would get in some of the other books. Oh, and I guess, yeah, just that one final little bit I would point out is the thing about the Bauta hiding place quadrants. Like I said, I felt like, when I first read it, or still now, I feel a little bit confused about how to really use the system. So, the way it's currently presented, at least. So if there could be a little bit more information about that, I think it would really be helpful to just really get the most out of using that system. But I still appreciate having that there because it's not something that I've seen other people mention before. So there is a little bit more left to be desired, but overall, I generally feel like this is a book worth getting. So yeah, that's my little review of this book. I hope you enjoyed the video, and yeah, that's all I got. So thanks for watching, and bye for now.